Hi, welcome. My name is Calvin Cartwright. Today I'm going to be talking about the history of clothing in early America. I have my reference here to help me with looking at my notes and things that I'm going to be talking about. So to start off, I want to be talking about the importance of it. I'm going to be talking about the different kinds of clothing. Specifically, I'm going to be talking about two types: civilian clothing and military clothing, or military uniforms. So let's go ahead and start off with the civilian clothing. Let me get to something a little more formal, since they were more formal back then. Here we go, something a little more formal. So to start off, civilian clothing. So let's start off with the men, the women, and the children. So first of all, men, they started off with an undergarment, so it kind of looks like old time PJs almost, in my opinion. Long kind of dress thing down to their knees, and then they had these socks was their undergarments. And then moving on, they had a foundation garment, which was a little like vest or like waistcoat is what they'd call it. And they had trousers, and then they'd have some shoes that had like just like regular, they kind of look like dress shoes but more like a boot. And then they had like a little buckle, kind of like a pilgrim kind of thing. And then on top of that, they'd have a thing called a daily garment, which is kind of like what they actually wore during the day. So that consisted of a thing called a frock, which is kind of like just a big, almost like a poncho, so like a big blanket, but kind of formed like a coat down to like almost like your waist or to like your mid thigh, and it'd be tucked into your trousers. And then they'd also have these other accessories. A hat that was made out of usually wool, that was more fitted, and it protected you from sun, or you'd wear something that would protect you from cold, depending on the seasons. And then you'd also have your other accessories like a bag or a canister, or maybe a big old basket on your back to hold different things or what you need throughout your day or for work. For the women, it was about the same thing, just a little different for women. They had undergarments, again, kind of like a dress or like a shirt thing. Looked kind of like old-time PJs. They had more of like a legging kind of thing, more than socks, but it was about the same thing. And then it's about like same thing, foundation garment. They had a stay and busk, which is kind of like a corset almost, but it's more like it just holds like this. It just holds like down to your waist. And then on top of that, they had a under petticoat, which is kind of just like a long skirt that they have on, or that would be, I guess, kind of tucked under your stays and busk. To finish it off, they'd have a little the daily garments, which would be they'd have a little kerchief thing around their neck area and onto their chest, and then they'd have a gown, which is just like a very nice dress, a very formal dress, especially back then, formal. And then they'd have a quilted petticoat. Again, it was like just a formal like skirt, like I was talking about, like the other one. The under petticoat, it's just on top, so you're warmer. Sorry, let me talk about this first. The kids, right? They wore about the same thing as the adults, just like smaller compacted versions for kids. And if it was cold, most of their stuff was made out of wool or cotton to stay warm. And if it wasn't warm enough, then they wear a big coat or something made out of those different materials. And then if it was warm, summertime, most of their clothing was made out of linen, which is more breathable and stuff like that. And yeah, moving on to military uniforms. Let me get into something a little better attire. Do you hear that? Excuse me. As I was talking, let's get back into this. I'm going to be talking about the military uniforms. The Civil War, there was the Confederate and the Union. The Union wore more dark blue. They wore dark blue was their color, and the Confederate were gray. Backtracking a little onto the Revolutionary War. The colors that they wore was mainly like neutral colors. It was more like a blue. I think they wore more blue, but they also sometimes wore like brown or gray. I might be getting that wrong. Anyways, so the way that uniforms changed from like the Revolutionary to the Civil War, they kind of changed protection-wise or survival-wise, but it really wasn't more protection. There wasn't any real, like, bulletproof padding that there is, like, today. They kind of had, like, just, like, thicker stuff, It's not going to stop a bullet, but, you might survive colder weather and stuff like that, depending on what you were wearing. And it definitely evolved from the Revolutionary to the Civil War. So that concludes my video. I think it's really important to know these things, especially about back then, because it reflects like the culture, identity, like kind of like the social norms with the civilian clothing. And I think it's very important just to understand it and to know it, because I didn't know it, but now that I know it, I kind of think it is a little more important to know that. I think it's kind of a cool thing to learn. And so yeah, thank you for watching. That's all I got today. I hope you like my transitions in this video, and thank you so much.